A crossover episode of Locked On Heat. I'll be joined by Locked On Pacers host Tony East here in a second to preview the biggest game of the regular season. Heat Pacers Sunday night, a ton at stake for the playoffs. All of it's coming up next here on Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Surprise! It's a crossover time because the playoffs actually start tomorrow for the Indiana Pacers and Miami Heat, who are effectively playing a play-in game to decide who may go to the play-in or the playoffs. It's as epic as it gets with a week to go in the season, which means we got to talk about it all. I'm Tony East. I host Locked On Pacers. And on the other side is
this part where I talk?
The synergy, man. We're ready.
Wes Goldberg from Locked On Heat. Let's do this.
Friday night, both teams won. Big games against Western Conference teams, which sets this up absolutely perfectly to be as awesome of a game as you can get in the regular season. I tweeted it last night, Wes. You know everything that's at stake. Would you like me to read them for everyone right now?
I would love if you did that.
Okay, the Pacers, as it stands, are 44-34. The Heat are 43-34, tied in the loss column, meaning the loser will have more losses. So here's what's at stake. The winner ends the night in 6. They'll have 34 losses. The Sixers and the loser will have 35. The winner gets the head-to-head tiebreaker between the Pacers and Heat. They split those two games in Miami in late November, early December, which we'll talk about in a second. So huge for the tiebreaker. The winner also gets the top spot in the Pacers, Heat, Sixers three-way tiebreaker. Catch here. The Pacers would clinch the top spot in that three-way tiebreaker. The Heat would have it, but the Heat would have to finish with a better East record than the Sixers. They currently have it and have 2 games against the Raptors to clinch it very easily, but they don't guarantee it by winning. They basically do. And the winner controls their own destiny for a postseason no play-in berth. The loser does not and would require losses from other teams. Capiche? It's about as big as a regular season game as you can get.
It is, man. And this week, I don't know about Indiana Pacers basketball, but for Miami Heat basketball, it's already been sort of playoff week, right? A game against the Knicks on Tuesday, Philadelphia on Thursday with Joel Embiid back, and then a big game on the back-to-back in Houston on Friday night. And then, of course, this one, which both teams for a few weeks now have had circled on the schedule. This is a must-win, basically, for both teams here. Obviously these teams are 1-1 on the season. That's part of the reason why this is such a big deal. It's because it serves as a tiebreaker. They only play 3 times this year, but what makes this game interesting, Tony, is also the 2 times these teams played was one of those weird, like back-to-back kind of baseball series things. They haven't seen each other since the early December. It was November 30th and December 2nd. Yeah, December 2nd. So it was like this weird, like little Thursday to Saturday weekend kind of matinee thing happening. And Halliburton didn't play in the second game, I believe. And, you know, the Heat had some guy, the Heat only had Bam Adebayo for one of these games. So, like, they've seen each other, but it's been a while. And even when they did see each other, they weren't at full strength. The games were really exciting, both teams scoring a lot of points. So those games did kind of play into the Pacers style. But Miami's defense has been so good and holding teams like five of the last 11 teams they've played, 5 of the last 12 teams they've played under 100 points. So they've been getting teams to play more of their style lately, but like the Pacers' strength is to get people playing sort of in their backyard. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens on Sunday.
I agree, and I it's funny because I naturally was inclined to do what you just said. Let's go back and look at those first 2 games. Let me just rattle off some nonsense so we can throw those games out pretty quickly. Okay. So the lowest score of the 4 scores, so 2 Heat scores and 2 Pacers scores from those 2 games was 129, which is just like sounds fake. The leading scorer for the Pacers in their win over the Heat was Bruce Brown, who is now on the Toronto Raptors. Josh Richardson scored in double figures for the Heat in both games.
Yep, he's out for the season.
He is out for the season. Buddy Hield scored in double figures for the Pacers in both games.
He plays for Philly.
Yes, he's now on the Philadelphia 76ers. Kyle Lowry was very good in both games.
Also plays for Philly.
For the Miami Heat. He also plays for Philly. So on one hand, yeah, there's
The
stuff
Sixers
to take.
did all of their pre-trade deadline scouting during this game. They're like, those two guys are good.
So there's some stuff you can take from these. Obviously, Jimmy was fantastic. Jaime Jaquez was very good.
Yeah.
Miles Turner in the game Bam didn't play was good. Obi Toppin was good in both games. But there's also like the teams look totally different. Terry Rozier was not involved. Pascal Siakam was not involved. Like it's almost hard to look at those and take anything away because of that. And because obviously with stakes, games will be played differently. They're not going to look, I would be shocked if either team hits 130 tomorrow night. I don't know about you.
I would be surprised by that also because of the way the Pacers are playing now. They have slowed down a little bit. They're not scoring at the same rate as they did before. Part of that is Halliburton. Part of that is just a different, like, it feels like stylistically they're a little bit more comfortable in the half court than they used to be. So that's like, it's almost a pro, like for Indiana too. But the number one thing if you're the Miami Heat is how do we stop Tyrese Halliburton? And I know like he hasn't been 100% because he isn't 100%. But this guy, he has torched the Heat over the last 2 years. Basically, it was last season where he had the game-winning three-pointer from like 37 feet out or something.
Christmas-ish, right?
Yeah. And then he had something like 40 points or whatever it was earlier this year against Miami. The Heat have had a hard time defending like apex guards over the last couple of years too. Terry Rozier has provided a little bit of like, attaboy interference, but it's not a whole, like, it's just not, they don't have like that stopper, you know what I mean? They don't have like a Derek White on the roster that's able to really kind of corral those guys. So, you see a couple nights ago, Tyrese Maxey goes off against them for 37 points. Jalen Green had his moments for the Rockets last night in Houston, and Halliburton has basically had his way with Miami's defense. So I'll be really interested to see what they do from an X's and O's standpoint. If we want to get into a little bit of that, like the Heat have been switching a little bit more lately. They have been zoning up earlier in games when they're facing these kinds of scoring guards. So they'll just Spo will just go to the zone real quick. He'll push that button early in the game, and they've been sending two to the ball a lot. And pressuring 94 feet also. So they tend to they don't really have like one look that they go with. They go with like a lot of different things, and you got Spoelstra on the sideline just like pulling different levers and going and toggling through these different schemes. But man, Halliburton, like he's smart, man. Like that stuff doesn't work against him. He's like, okay, this is what you're doing. I can do this, and because he's a good shooter and a good passer, he can do all that stuff. But my question to you, Tony, is like, what have you seen from Halliburton lately that would either, give you confidence that he can kind of hit those numbers again, or are you a little worried about where he is with this hamstring and just sort of his health overall?
He's played better the last couple weeks. Still not, whatever you'd call what he was doing in November, December, but much better. He set the franchise assist record last night against OKC, which I'm not just saying to gas him up. I'm saying to say the Thunder tried to make him not a scorer. They said, we're sending two to you every time. Get it out of your hands. He's like, okay. Whatever, that's fine. Siakam has 21 points on 10 shots. Aaron Nesmith has a really good shooting game. Miles Turner has 16 points in like 18 minutes of play. They just carved him up because that's what he's good at, is what you just described, is like teams throw a weird coverage at him for like 4 possessions. The Pacers go, what? Huh? And then they figure it out. And then you have to keep adjusting on the fly. So gimmicky adjustments with him and Carlisle too. They're like the Pacers' third quarter net ratings, like top 5 in the league, because when they have a break to talk about stuff and figure it out, they're very good. They are going against the tactician in Spoelstra in the league, so it's not as easy as it is against other teams. But I wouldn't be so worried as the Pacers about what the Heat throw uniquely at Tyrese Halliburton, because at times he can just get the three going and break that stuff up. The gimmick that's going to be tough is the Pacers have, for better or worse, been saved a lot recently by TJ McConnell. He's been playing unbelievably well since the All-Star break. 15 points a game almost. Great passing. His energy is really impactful. Their bench unit's been good because of him. The biggest way that teams try to bust up units where he's tearing them up is zone, because he can't shoot. And the Heat are just the best in the league at one possession throw at you zone, or some weird zone, or just, you know it. That's what that's supposed thing. And so that is where I feel like the rhythm of the Pacers can be broken up, is they turn to now McConnell plus Halliburton lineup sometimes, or McConnell plus Siakam as the two ball handlers because their bench has been so good. That'll be a lot harder, I think, against Miami.
Yeah, the difference between teams that play zone and the Heat that play zone is that it's part of the Heat strategy, right? Like this team practices zone. They practice zone in October before the season even starts, and they're using it almost on a nightly basis. And so I would expect in this game, as soon as Halliburton goes out, they will go to the zone exclusively when TJ McConnell is in. Because the other part of that is Miami's personnel. If we're talking about second units, then you get a lot of like Kevin Love at center. You know, you might have Tyler. You're gonna have Tyler Hero coming off the bench, and like I would expect TJ McConnell to try to get Hero into the action, run some pick and roll. So they're gonna zone up, and then in that second unit, they bring Haywood Highsmith into the game, Caleb Martin into the game, I mean Haka's into the game. So they start throwing those long wings in there, and you'll get a guy like Highsmith at the top of that zone, trying to screw things up early in the shot clock, and he's been really good at doing that. So. I think we're going to see a lot of zone. Almost, I would imagine that, like, as soon as, like, everybody's going to have, like, a shot caller on the Heat's defense, and as soon as TJ McConnell enters the game, they're all going to be shocked into his zone. I think they'll almost exclusively be in that. The Pascal Siakam piece, to me, is the most interesting thing to me, because if Halliburton's going to be, like, you mentioned Oklahoma City trying to make Halliburton into a passer. I would imagine that's what Miami's probably going to do. That was their strategy against Jalen Brunson on Tuesday night. And, it worked, to varying degrees. Like, they turned Dante DiVincenzo. It was like, we're going to turn Dante DiVincenzo into a scorer. And he was like, cool, I'm going to score 31 points. And they're like, all right, maybe not that much of a score. So that's sort of the other part of it.
It always sounds better than it looks, doesn't it?
Right, yeah. It's like, oh, wait, he just... Malachi Flynn went off for 50 points. What? Like, we didn't mean to turn you into Kevin Durant for a night, but yeah, they'll have to do that. So that's why I bring up Pascal Siakam is, all right, if you're going to turn Halliburton into a passer, you don't want Pascal Siakam to go full blown Super Saiyan Pascal Siakam either, right? Like, you need to limit him also, and that's where I think the Bam Adebayo versus Siakam thing is going to be interesting if they even go that route. The Heat have been starting Nikola Jovic at power forward. I think they'll probably go Nico versus Miles Turner here, just to put some size on him, and then have Bam guard Siakam. And
I dig it.
Boy, is that interesting. That's interesting, because if you put Bam and Siakam on an island, be like, hey guys, hey all NBA forwards / centers / whatever you guys are, freak athletes, versatile players. You guys are on an island. Have fun. We're going to have this matchup over here. And then the rest of Miami's defense putting two to the ball on Tyrese, coming off of ball screens, all these things. Like, it could be fascinating.
I like that you mentioned Pascal. I think that is a huge storyline from this game, given the changes from last time. You know what else is a big storyline, Wes?
Is it FanDuel?
It is FanDuel, our great friends who know that the sports calendar right now is as good as it gets, loaded. And FanDuel's making it even more exciting, Wes, to get in on the action right now, because if you're a new customer on FanDuel, you can get $200 in bonus bets right now with any winning $5 bet. That's a lot of money. That's $200 you can use to bet on the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL. Everything's clicking down there in Miami, and so much more. To get that, though, you have to go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's how you can get $200 with any winning $5 bet. FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make your first bet a big win on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
So on FanDuel, the 6 Man of the Year odds still heavily favor Malik Monk, who is out for the season. Naz Reid has been climbing up the board, but you could still get him at plus 145. I wonder why the voters will will the voters vote for somebody who's injured for the season? It shouldn't disqualify him because he's still going to make the 65-game limit, Malik Monk will. But just because he's out for the year, I do wonder if voters in their head just sort of almost disqualify him, maybe subconsciously or consciously. Naz Reid at plus 145, sprinkle a little bit of cash on there. Why not?
I will give no advice. TJ McConnell should win. Let's talk Siakam. So You just nailed the two things that are going to stand up. One of the two things that's going to stand out about that matchup to me. One is if the Heat do cross match. I think you're right that they will, because we've seen the Pacers sprinkle in more recently, even just to start a possession, not even to like do an action. Siakam will just screen for Haliburton to see what the defense will do. Are they going to switch right away? Are they going to do nothing? Like, how's that going to impact what they do the rest of the possession? And, it's easy to not switch that if you're defense, but then all of a sudden maybe it's a screen that actually opens something up or an action can get started. And, of course, he's very good. He had 21 points on 10 shots last night, right? The Siakam thing that I am maybe the most intrigued by is, look, for all of time since TJ Warren's Pacers existence, Jimmy Butler has just crushed this Pacers team. I mean, they can't guard big wings at all. They really have struggled against Jimmy. Now they have someone for those matchups. Not that Siakam's amazing at that kind of stuff, but he's like the right size. It's not Aaron Nesmith. It's not a center. It's not Obi Toppin's slow feet. It makes sense. So Jimmy in that the first game had 36 and took 20 free throws. He earned them. I'm not a Jimmy foul hater. In the second game, Jimmy Butler had 33 with 9 free throws. They just struggle with him. And I wonder how much Siakam guarding him, as much as that's actually going to happen versus Aaron Nesmith guarding him. Aaron Nesmith just had a wonderful game defending LeBron James about a week ago. 1 foul in 39 minutes on LeBron. It was very impressive. I wonder what they're going to be able to do to him that they haven't been before, because they have forwards they can put on him for a whole game and not just parts of a game. And so Siakam, I mean, we on both ends is going to change kind of even all the history of Pacers Heat. And that doesn't even account for the other thing I want to get to in a minute, which is one of these teams has made the finals twice in the last 3 years. The other team hasn't made the playoffs at all in the last 3 years. So there's just a lot of fun dislodging factors from these teams.
Yeah, the defense against Jimmy Butler is going to be interesting because Jimmy is such an interesting player at this stage of the season. I'm trying to figure out, okay, is he just waiting for the playoffs? Is he trying to save whatever like kind of fuel he's got left in the gas tank anymore? And the Miami Heat go as Jimmy Butler goes. That's not surprising. Most teams go as their star goes, but it's sort of an open-ending question until tip-off, and then you kind of see how engaged Jimmy Butler is. Is he sprinting in transition? Is he trying to get to the rim, or is he sort of just walking into post-ups and kicking out? And is it playoff Jimmy or is it not, essentially? And when they get a very engaged sort of pedal to the metal Jimmy Butler, this team can beat anybody. And when they don't get that, then all of a sudden that trickle down effect, there's a lot more on Bam's shoulders to score. There's a lot more on Terry Rozier to bail him out on the end of the shot clock. There's a lot more on a guy like Tyler Hero, who came back on Friday night after being out, to score and lift the offense and basically run things for pockets of a game. They need, obviously, like if there was a time for playoff Jimmy Butler to come out and play, it would be Sunday, right? Like this is this is a playoff game for all intents and purposes. This is it. Like, hey Jimmy, hey, how about this? You want to take a week off so you don't have to do the play-in tournament? Go out and win this game.
Win this one.
yeah, and then we'll give you that week off, buddy. So he's been better. He scored 20 points 2 nights ago, 22 against the Rockets on Friday. Still not quite there at that level, but starting to get there. So if you're a Heat fan, I guess you feel a little better about that. But still, I have no idea what to expect from Jimmy. I think Aaron Nesmith is a really interesting guy because we talked about how long it's been since these teams have played, November and early December. Aaron Nesmith has been through the Pokemon Elite Four since then. Like, he's leveled up. Like, that dude is better now than he was before, right?
Yes,
like, that guy, if Jimmy Butler's not fully in it, he can guard Jimmy Butler. Like, Aaron Nesmith at this stage, he can guard Jimmy Butler if Jimmy Butler's not bringing it. And if that's the case, that frees up Pascal Siakam. That frees up so much of everything else that Indiana wants to do 100%. Defensively. So if Jimmy Butler has to put the stress test, like the John Taffer bar rescue stress test, on the Pacers defense early in this game and set the tone, because if you don't do that, then what happens is what we talked about earlier, Tony. It's like then the Pacers get to take hold of the tone. They get to create the terms of engagement. And if that's the case, and now we're playing an up and down game, I think the Heat can play that way. As we've seen, these teams played that way for 2 games and they split it, but they would prefer not to.
Well, we're talking about players who have leveled up and can change this game. Jaime Jaquez, obviously, he was good against the Pacers in like it was like his 15th career game at the time, and he's obviously better now. And the Pacers have changed their defense and their principles since then, but the way he kind of plays and the stuff he's good at is stuff that the Pacers in general are kind of willing to live with, given what they want to give up. And he's like, okay, I'll just drop in this 5 to 8 footer all night on your team. And especially when he's playing with Jimmy or with another wing, whoever that may be, Haywood Highsmith, whoever, I think he's going to be really tough for the Pacers to match up with again. Like they just don't have the right guy to put on him. And so if he can do, I think in the first game he had 20 something when these two teams played, and the second game he wasn't as good. If he's that good again, where he's just back you down twice, turn over a shoulder, shoot, score Jaime Jaquez all night, then I think they have to think about, do we put someone different on him, and who do we put on Jimmy, and do we have to go bigger more than we thought? Like, does Obi Toppin have to play a bunch of minutes tonight? And then your defense suffers in other places. So as much as Nesmith can, in theory, be a guy who stresses Jimmy out, Jaquez can come in and just neutralize that by being another sizable scorer for the Heat.
Yeah, it depends. Like, so Jaime's run into a little bit of the rookie wall lately. That guy has played so many minutes, so many games
tough
for the
them
Heat
at this point.
And and for a rookie who's not used to playing an 82-game season on this Heat team that has been so injured, fourth or fifth most games lost due to injury this season, 35 different starting lineups. Like, this team has been through it, but through it all, Jaime's basically been the most healthy guy, and he's been asked to sort of reprise a Jimmy Butler role at times. He's been asked to just come off the bench and run the second unit almost as a backup point guard sometimes, and everything in between. He hasn't scored 20 points in more than a month. So it's been a little rough for him. And he had 12 against Houston Friday night on 5 of 7 shooting. It was nice, but the rebounds are a little bit down, the assists are a little bit down. Frankly, like, Eric Spoelstra's not running as much stuff for Jaime anymore. And now with Tyler Hero back and part of that second unit, it looks like Tyler Hero is just going to come off the bench for the rest of the regular season here as he works his way back from this injury. Now you've got Jaime probably playing off of Tyler Hero. And what does that look like? So that'll be interesting to see if Spo tries to get Jaime in the post a little bit more, maybe run some split cuts for Tyler to get him those off the catch stuff that Spo is always trying to create for Tyler Hero. Or if he's just like, Tyler, just go do your thing, and Jaime will fit in and find his place. And he's good at that too. He could do the backdoor cuts, and he could do all the screens, and he could do all that kind of stuff also. So, yeah, I mean, if Jaime Jaquez were to have a good game against the Pacers, that would be big for the Heat, not just for this game, obviously, as sort of a swing factor, but it would also mean, oh my God, like, Jaime's back, and it would have like much bigger repercussions potentially for the Heat too, if Jaime can have a little bit of a bounce back game here, because physically he just looks a little bit worn down, and that's understandable, but it's just a tough place to be at this stage in the season.
One more thing I want to get to, actually two more. One is I spelled experience wrong on our graphic, and I just noticed it 22 minutes in, so that's really exciting. Not going to fix that. Two is actually a third one. Two is not only is winning this game about making the playoffs, the chance of playing the Cavs instead of possibly Boston is like
this is the most important game on the schedule for so many reasons.
Yeah. The Bucks aren't like so threatening to the Heat specifically, but like even just a chance you play Boston instead of anyone else is
no, I mean, there is such a gap between, to me, the Celtics and the rest of the Eastern Conference. And the way I keep framing this is, if you took the league and you broke the league out in tiers, right? You'd have Denver and Boston probably top tier.
Yep.
Okay. And then second tier, you would have like Oklahoma City, Minnesota. Probably them, right?
Yep.
That next tier would be teams like the Mavericks and the
Clippers, yeah.
We're still not getting to an Eastern Conference team.
Right? I might have put the Bucks in that third tier before this week, where they've lost like 3 what the heck games in a row. This is
sort of what made me think about it, right? Like, you lose to Washington, you lose to Memphis. You're like, do you know what?
Toronto.
And Toronto. You're like, do you understand what's happening right now, right? Like, these are basketball games going into the playoffs. It's time to get your stuff together. The wheels are coming off at the worst possible time. You get to that fourth tier, and I think now you could put Milwaukee in there, but now you're talking about like New Orleans, like. Yeah. Which is a play-in team, maybe Phoenix you throw in there. Like, we're getting like 4 tiers down. So the point of me saying this is the Celtics are the team to beat. The East goes through Boston. There's no doubt about it. But if you can get A, out of the play-in tournament, boom, enough of a bonus already. If that was not a motivating factor, it should be. 2, you get to play Cleveland in the first round potentially as that 3-6
Orlando, Milwaukee, whatever.
And like that's such a better result than having to maybe play Milwaukee or Boston in the first round. And then the other part of it too is that you're on the Milwaukee side of the bracket if they stay in this 2 seed. So if you beat, and you should beat Cleveland because they don't look like a serious team right now, then okay, Milwaukee is eminently beatable. So you get to postpone a potential Celtics matchup all the way into the conference finals. And the other version of this is you're in the play-in tournament in that 7-8 game. You have to probably play Philly at this point with Joel Embiid back, so that's not a guarantee. So you could easily lose a 1-game matchup against Embiid if he just goes MVP for 48 minutes. And now you're playing one of now you have to play the 9-10 matchup against Chicago or Atlanta, and now you're backing into a Celtics matchup in the first round. Like, there's so much at stake here, not just to avoid the play-in tournament, but everything that happens after that, Tony, is it could literally define the playoffs. It could determine whether or not you are a loser in the first round or if you make the conference finals. It's that level of a difference.
I don't want to poo-poo the Pacers' chances of making the conference finals, but the Heat's expectations for what they would do with the 16 and the Pacers are certainly different. But a chance to win a series and a chance to win more games and get more information about your young team is still way better than just getting swamped by the Celtics machine in 4 games and learning very little about your team. And that's sort of like the last thing I want to talk about with this. I alluded to it earlier. The Heat were in the 2021 finals. They were in the 2023 finals. Been there, done that. They're very good. They know what they can do in the postseason. The Pacers have not played a playoff game since the bubble. There's a little bit of a dichotomy in what these teams are.
What was the last home playoff game for Indiana?
The last in Indianapolis.
Yeah, not bubble. Yeah.
The Celtics Pacers series in 2019 when Oladipo was out for the season.
No.
And Bojan Bogdanovic was their number 1 offensive player. Yes. My fun Pacers fact for a while has been that the currently they're not rebuilding anymore, but that the Thunder more recently have played a playoff game than the Pacers.
The Bojan Bogdanovic era is what we're talking about. Wow.
So yeah, they were good in the bubble, but
sure.
The Heat know all about that Pacers first round series. I mean, they smoked them. It wasn't even close. Sabonis was out, so like caveats, but they would have lost anyway. But still, like that, they got their butts kicked. I wonder how. So if the Pacers had not played the in-season tournament this year, like this would be the biggest game of Tyrese Halliburton's career tonight, like his entire career. Like that is how wide of an experience gap there is in this game. And I wonder how much that matters, if at all.
It's such a great point that you make too, because if you're Indiana, it might even help you to, just like ignorance is bliss almost. It's like, let's just go out there, play our game. We don't really know. And like the thing with the Pacers is they're not like they're a young team, yes, but they're like, first of all, they're coached by Rick Carlisle, who is almost as experienced as it comes as a head coach. Like he's gonna have the team ready. Like. So that's a big part of this. And then Halliburton just like you mentioned the in-season tournament, he loved that. Like he really took to the stakes of whatever it was that didn't really have any stakes, but he was in he was in on it, right? Like he was totally in. And then you got Pascal Siakam, who literally has won a championship, which is not something that anybody on the Miami Heat roster can say. So he at least has the ring. So I hear you. There's definitely going to be a youth thing there, but like TJ McConnell has been through it. Like that dude's been in the league for a long time. And he has, by the way, I'm glad you brought him up earlier because that is the guy that just looks like Heat fans have a thing called random scrub Heat killer. And it's not even like TJ McConnell ain't no scrub, but he'll get the RSHK label if and when he goes off for 27 points on like 8 for 12 shooting or whatever it is. So that's going to happen. But I don't know that the experience versus the youth is as big of a gap versus like maybe another more youthful team than Indianapolis, because they've been able to Indiana, but they've been able to rise to the challenge. But the thing with the Heat is, yes, they are experienced. They know what they have to do. They will bring it. Everybody I am very confident in saying that, except for Jimmy Butler. Like I don't mean to keep hammering this point, but like if he's engaged, the Heat win this game, and I could say it confidently. If he's a little wobbly, then it becomes much more of an interesting game.
Wes, I believe you just shortchanged one of the players in the Miami Heat when you said that Siakam has a ring. Patty Mills is an NBA champion.
Sorry, Patty. Sorry, buddy. Of all the players that are going to play in this game, I mean,
Patty Mills.
Yeah, I tend to forget about that 2014 championship for some reason.
They played the Heat in the series.
That's right.
I had to look up their roster. I was like, that sounds right, but I'm not certain. I'm looking forward to this. I can't wait. This is the highest stakes game of the Pacers regular season. Obviously, their Lakers tournament game was more meaningful for them, and a chance for them to make the playoffs. Chance for them to avoid Philly in a play-in game with Joel Embiid, as the Heat saw Thursday, doing Joel Embiid stuff. No Boston, tiebreakers, everything. Pacers, if they win, can close 2-1 and get the 6th seed still. Heat will have 4 games left after, so I don't know their exact permutations, but it's probably just 3-1 because of the same things. And they play the Raptors twice in those 4 games. So that's not.
They get the Raptors twice. They have a back-to-back, Atlanta and then Dallas at home. So yeah, they could probably, if they win on Sunday, they can afford to drop one of those games probably. But
yeah,
playoff status, Basketball Reference, all the playoff odds tracking things, they basically have the Sixers and the Heat neck and neck because of this game. Sunday will, for the most part, unless something weird happens afterwards, determine who ends up with the 6th seed.
Pacers' final 3 is Toronto, Cleveland, Atlanta. And there's a chance that Atlanta has nothing to play for in that final game, depending on how the week goes. So some winnable games in there. Although the Bucks just proved the Raptors are not to be overlooked by either of these teams.
I guess not. It's not a walkover.
This was great, Wes. I hope we set the scene well for basically a play-in game before the play-in tournament. I can't wait. I know you can't either. What do you got going on after Pacers Heat?
Oh, you know what it's gonna be. We're gonna have a recap of the game Sunday night, right after the game. Really excited to watch this on Sunday. It's been a good week of Miami Heat basketball, a lot of high stakes, and over at Locked On Heat, we've got the reactions for all the games. Pacers
blew it against the Nets, which makes this game even more meaningful. But they've been playing decently well besides that game this past week. Same thing will be coming on Locked On Pacers after the game with the guest. And Wes, as my listeners know, I very frequently credit you guys when I use the term credit cookies or blame pie after games. So perhaps I will steal some dessert phrases depending on how the game goes.
Hopefully it's not credit cookies for you guys. Hopefully everyone's handing them out.